We have a broad array of people at this webinar right now. But for the students, if you're like entry level going into and evaluation fields, I'm going to give you a piece of advice that I think works pretty well. And that's always try to be an expert at something. So even if you go into a new and you're surrounded by can learn from, there's usually like, I don't know, quite a few things that you can become an expert of and be the person in the office who knows that one thing. And that's what's going to create your value. So are the person who can design in Canva, or you are the person who knows how to create a really cool chart or use Tableau or something like that, something that your organization uses regularly. You can be the expert in that thing, come in even as an entry level person. So just to start off, that has nothing to strategy, which is what we're talking about today. All right, so I got everyone to practice using the chat just a little bit because I'm going to ask you to answer some questions. Actually, only like one now. I think I changed it a little bit, but I do want you to be able to jump at and please definitely ask questions, enter it into the Q&A too as we go. But let's begin. All right, so this is my other title that I didn't use. Everything you have been taught about reporting is wrong. Here's what to do instead. So that's what I'm teaching today. And the agenda, I want to learn a little about you, who's here watching this. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to myself, tell a little story, jump into a few lessons, then we're going to close out and answer questions, whatever questions you have. I always enjoy that part too. So first off, what type of report designer are you? All right, so this is a little trickier for the people in the room, but I'm going to read through them. For the people online with the chat, you can, this is like a check all, you can be multiple things. So are people who are used to creating reports or who have experience creating reports in Microsoft Office. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, maybe also exporting to PDF. In the room, if you want to raise your hands, are you an A? Do you create report? Okay. Yes. Hands up. Yep. All right. B is Google Drive. And any kind of online kind of tool, Open Office, something that might not be Office, but is the next. C, and you can raise your hands as I'm talking about them in the room if you want to join. I'm watching the thing too. C is Adobe Creative. That would be things like Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop, that kind of thing. Okay, I see some hands. I see some things flying by. D is your interactive visualization BI tool, business intelligence tools like BI, Tableau, and perhaps Google Data Studio, that kind of thing. Okay, see more hands. I see something through. E is Canva, mostly more people Canva than the other two. Canva, Data Wrapper, and Flourish. So that would be your kind of web design tools, PictoChart. There are a couple others that you can there. See a hand, I've seen some come through. F are your code tools. So that would be like R or Python, maybe JavaScript with like D3. And G are your web design tools. Things like WordPress, Squarespace, Wix. G. Okay. Dabbled in. I'm just going to scroll through really quickly. Okay. ABC, ABE. Yep. That's about what I would expect. So only a few coders, a few web designers, a couple web designers, mostly graphic design, some people dabbling in business intelligence stuff. Maybe you've expanded outside of the base Word, PowerPoint, Excel, that kind of thing, to kind of dabble into and grow into other things. Usually the difference between A and B has to do with like where you're working and who you're working with. The people around you really have a way of influencing the kind of tools they use too. F and G. Okay, Shannon. All right, so my name is Chris Lysy. A bunch of people know me because I draw a bunch of cartoons, or I've drawn a bunch of cartoons over the last so many years. Made their way into a lot of presentations and some books and that kind of thing. I've also written a couple of books. I usually have at least one sitting next to me. They're self-published things like The Reporting Revolution, which some of the stuff that I talk about here comes from. I've been a researcher and evaluator for about 20 years since undergrad. Went into contract research and then moved into evaluation. Lately, though, I have been really a report designer and a community of practice leader. And that's what I've been doing lately for the last few years. And report design, especially recently, I do a lot more of that as like the main part of my work. And it's been a shift from data person to design person that's kind of happened over the last decade, maybe more. I still bounce them back and forth a little bit, but spend a lot of time designing nowadays. And okay, so we have checklists, and checklists are I always prefer doing some user experience design, talking to people and seeing kind of how they react to things. But checklists are a good place to start. And I know you all have a good number of checklists at the evaluation center. There's my dog reading my book. So I teach a workshop, online workshop. I guess that's what it is, coaching group. We have a community site and we meet every week on Wednesdays, actually, in the afternoon. So if you're at all interested, I have that and there's the information there. I also have essentially developed a reporting platform that the kind of reporting platform that I kind of dreamed would exist, I'm developing right now to make it exist. At first, I just started with projects, and then it kind of seemed fitting to just kind of pull everything together so I could do it more of a shared services approach with tools and that kind of thing. But I'll talk about that a little later too. First off, let's talk about a story. So this is Jay. Now, Jay is not a real person. She's more of an amalgamation of like some of the different people I've worked with over the years in terms of teaching, clients, colleagues, that kind of thing. Now, Jay was a research assistant at the big company, which was great. They had lots of resources. It was a good place to get started. They were able to send her some nice data visualization courses and design courses, which were fun. Unfortunately, she was unable to fully apply what she learned. Basically, she didn't have that role. They didn't report that way, so she didn't get a chance to use those skills. But Jay eventually moved away from that research position and had a job offer. She was going to become the learning and outcomes manager for the Medium nonprofit. Now, this was a really nice position for Jay. In it, she was going to be able to do a bit more with reporting and use some of those skills she developed. So this is kind of how things went. She started her first report. She got really happy because she had a team and she had, more people to work with, which was great. Unfortunately, that led to lots of edits and challenges, back and forth edits, but eventually she was happy-ish with the report that they created, shared it with their boss, and the boss said it was too long. So they went back to the drawing board and cut, added more visuals, and then they shared it with a different boss who said it's now too short. So they ended up in this revision cycle, bouncing back and forth from a report that was both too long, too short. Eventually, they completed it and put it up on the web. Unfortunately, she knew a little bit about analytics and actually checked the response on the page and noticed that very few actually downloaded it, which was too bad, but they ended up starting on next year's report. This is kind of a common kind of cycle, and I call it the report design frustration cycle. It's this idea that we put all this work into creating reports that maybe only a few people end up seeing. Then we try to apply these different skills and we go up and down, and the challenges on as we're trying to do our work. So my goal really, when working with both my students, with my clients, is to try to break this frustration cycle. Because I think we put a lot of effort and time, not really into the design of the reports or even the writing of the reports, but in these kind of constant revisions back and forth, missed different expectations about what we're creating, why we're creating it, what we hope to achieve with our reports. So first, let's do a lesson. What is a report? And I think we use this term all the time. The term report doesn't always mean the same to different. Actually, chances are it probably doesn't mean the same thing to really almost anyone. Because report could mean all sorts of different things. So in one, we have this nice little checklist for an evaluation report, program evaluation report on the end, and that's your technical evaluation report. As said in the checklist, it says, this is not your kind of outgoing communication report, this is a technical report. Then on the side, we have communication vehicles. And I think these are the two kind of general types of reports that we have, and they have different goals. The goal of a technical report is to be the kind of the system documentation of our work. The goal of a communication vehicle is uptake and engagement, and they're different things. They're not the same thing. And I think that's the first challenge that we face. And the biggest frustration is that we try to make them the same thing. We try to create a technical report that is clean, clear, visually appealing, engaging, and promote uptake. And while still being systematic, providing all the documentation we need to be a professional evaluation report. And this gets people stuck. And it creates that cycle in the beginning that I talked about. So lesson one, if you want uptake and engagement, you will not get that from a traditional technical report alone. You need more than one report. Now, I was giving this talk last week, and in some and a couple of times I've done this, I think I need to add a little addendum. What is this? The technical report has a purpose. Often it's a client expectation. It's part of being an evaluation professional is showing your work, is doing this. And it also supports the defensibility of your findings and recommendations. And yes, I am more than happy to share my slides along with some other stuff I'll share later too. And we can send in an email, right, Samantha, after the fact. Yeah. All right, but most people will never read your technical report. It's not meant for most people. Most people are not going to read a long technical report. No matter what we could make it the prettiest technical report in the world. Most people see it. Engagement with attention, and attention must be earned. You are very unlikely to earn that with a technical report unless it is highly anticipated technical report on something super politically sensitive that everybody's going to pick over. Unless it's that, probably very few people really will. So my advice is to create both. Yes. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, Jamie, but even the people who do intend to read your full report are more likely to skim and not really heavily dive into it unless it's really interesting, connects with their work, or they really need to dive. Sometimes a technical report is there because there are some things that need to be on paper just in case. And not everything has to be read to be useful. All right, lesson number 2, stop it with all the PDFs. So this tends to be how people report. You have like a 40-page report, maybe it's a 30-page report or 50-page report, bunch of appendices, that kind of thing. Maybe you worked it down to 30-page reports. Chances are it's a PDF that people will download, created. Maybe the design was polished in Adobe or something, cleaner. You decided, okay, well, that's not good enough for our different audiences. We need pagers too. So you create a couple of different 2-pagers meant for different audiences. They're also PDFs. Then you deliver a presentation for your report to the executives. Maybe you have a different presentation delivered to some other stakeholders. And that presentation is really PowerPoint. Maybe you share it. Afterwards, you share the slides. So we have a few different PDFs. And usually we're working Word, PowerPoint, Excel, this kind of thing. That's where most of our reports happen. I don't really expect you to stop doing PDFs, but because it's going to be hard, it might take. But this is why I like PDFs. PDFs are not mobile responsive. If you try to open a PDF on your phone, you're going to go nuts. You're going to scroll around, move things around. Even though you can open them on your phone, it's not a pleasurable reading experience. If you talk to people about how they consume reports, they're not going to say they consume them on the mobile phone. So you might go, okay, well, we shouldn't design it for the mobile phone. But our reports have never been designed for the mobile phone if we're even creating them in PDF. They just haven't been. So there's no reason to open something on a device that's supposed to open. It just doesn't work for phones. PDFs are not translatable. Let's say you have a web page, any blog, open it in Chrome. And somebody on the other side of the world opens it in Chrome. There will be automatically, Google will pick it up and translate it into the language of their browser. So over 130 languages are translated just by being online, just by being in an HTML document. If you put this in a PDF document, if you want to translate it in different languages, you have to do this manually. And you have to translate it over and over again. You have to be intentional about it and create copies and over again. So if you go to some global organizations, you'll notice, you have a report, it's translated into 10 different languages. Some of our work, even when you don't have the budget to do that kind of stuff, you could just put it on the web. And at least you're creating this opportunity that people can use their browsers to auto-translate it into a language of their choice. Might not be perfect, but it's way better than the nothing that we had before. PDFs are not SEO friendly. That's search engine optimization. That's how it'll show up in Google. Google can find PDFs. It can read PDFs. But when given the choice between a PDF and an incredibly inferior product that talks about the same topic, it will deliver the inferior product that talks about the same process first before it will deliver a PDF. Because PDFs are not designed to be web readable in the same kind of way. They're designed to save us from having to redesign our reports to meet the needs of the web. And PDFs are not social media friendly. There are some tools like LinkedIn, you can share a PDF. It's even how you create carousels on LinkedIn now. But that said, those carousels are designed differently, the needs of the web. Most PDFs are not. Most PDFs are not very social media friendly. So it makes it harder to share across different channels. PDFs were built in the 90s. They were built pre-social media. They were built for computers. We had our desktops, and we wanted to take the nice, well-designed report and put it to the web and deliver it to people via email, these kind of things. There was a reason that they exist, but not built today's kind of multi-responsive, auto-traded, global kind of networks that we have right now. They were just never designed that way. They don't meet that need. They've made some changes, some accommodation things that make them maybe a little bit more accessible than some other static documents, but they're still not designed for the world in which we live right now. So you need to do more than a PDF. And by simply changing how you report, by changing the methods and the channels, you can reach broader audiences. This isn't like, okay, everybody needs to be a top graphic designer, learn all the tricks, that kind of thing to share more. Sometimes we can just change the methods by which we share our work. It will immediately reach a broader audience just by how we report, not what the report looks like, but the methods that we use to report. So reporting for the modern times. So some of this stuff is based on stuff that I've known kind of as a blogger, as an independent business person for the last 6 years. There's a way in which you approach the web that is different from the way in which we approach reports and report sharing and dissemination on the web. So this is more of a web-based strategy. that we can then apply to our reporting. And this is meant to stop you from kind of going nuts with all the different types of ways that you can report. There are a billion ways to report. PDFs are one of those ways. There are a bunch of different styles of PDF too. So you can use some of these tools, but this is more of an overall strategy to help you kind of frame your own reporting strategy. It means, okay, does it change from PDF to reach broader audience mean people or the same people better? I would say it means reach more people that you necessarily reach if you, people that would not see your PDF otherwise. So people who might Google search for your report, but it will never come up, or for topics related to that. The other people who would open things up on their phone via email and read through them if they could, that wouldn't do it if there was a PDF to download on the other end. By a broader audience and more people, I mean that because they could be in our audience profile, our group of people that we're trying to reach. All right, so macro strategy, pillar content, amplifier content, conversational content. Now, what do I mean by that? Pillar content is like your base report. So this is your annual report, your 30-pager, maybe you've adapted it into a website. Maybe you're not ready to go that far. Maybe you're willing to do that for other things, not your main report. So you still create a PDF report, but maybe you change it into a slide doc that's set for widescreen, that's more like the computer monitors people will be reading it on, and not the paper that only a handful of people will actually print it to. So there's that, or data dashboards. These are our larger pieces of content, things that deliver more of our evaluation results, findings, that thing. That's our pillar content. When we design, we want to design that kind of content so that it supports the other pieces that I'm going to talk next. It's also going to be the place where we funnel people back to. So if you want more information, go back here to our pillar content. That's where you're going to find more detail. Amplifier content. Amplifier content is a content that exists to spread your report. If you just have one report, it's not going to amplify itself. Amplifier content is infographics, micrographics. That's just my term for like social media images, like featured images on blog posts, that kind of thing. Like the kind of images that would be shared on Twitter. Every single website has every article on the New York Times have a featured image. Every article on Sports Illustrated is going to have its featured image. Everything we share should have a featured image because it kicks into how the web is constructed as a visual platform. It's how we map, it's how we guide, and it's how we deliver people to different pieces of information. It's also an opportunity to share the work, share our results, our findings, interesting things, challenges to a broader audience by leveraging those visuals. Social content, email newsletters, videos, YouTube videos, these kinds of things can all be added to your overall approach with the idea that these are the things that can reach out into different social channels. So instead of just saying, here's my PDF report on Twitter, you share 5 different tweets, each one with a different image, each one with a different fact or finding, or here's a recommendation, or here's a challenge we faced. Here's a quote from a participant. Here's a chart that we thought was interesting. Each one creates an interesting conversation that's focused on delivering something specific to the crowd that we're trying to reach. And it's linked back to our pillar content. So if people are interested for more, then they can go back to the PDF. But this is the content that helps spread the idea of what you're doing. So another example is this is when Samantha went to share about this webinar, there's an image, there's a post about with the image of my image, that kind of thing. And it leads back to a page, which is a main page, a registration page that just has a calendar of everything. It doesn't have to, on that page, you won't find my picture, you won't find profile, anything like that, you find the registration button and it goes there. But that image, that post exists to amplify the actual evaluation cafe that we're sitting in right here and talking where I'm talking to you today. All right. Lastly, conversational content. I don't think most people do this. I think we've kind of jumped into the second piece, but if you look at how social media channels are constructed, they're constructed to be conversational. So LinkedIn, if you go on LinkedIn and you try to create a post, if that post is popular, it will have more comments. Comments make things more popular than likes or views, because comments show that people are engaged, and that engagement amplifies the content too. And when we're sharing our reports, oftentimes we're like, okay, we're sharing this work that we've done. But reports are, if you look at reporting as like an ongoing conversation with your stakeholders, that's something we can build upon. Sometimes we want people to give us feedback. Sometimes we want additional information, or we want reactions. And if we can report in a way that we are looking for comments, if we engage people in a way like getting specific people to be discussants on our blog post, on our LinkedIn posts that we reach out to in advance, just to create a conversation around different aspects of our reporting, this would help spread our reporting too. It would also turn our reports into something bigger than what they were in the beginning, because they grow based on the replies and the feedback that we get from our audiences and our stakeholder groups. We can do this if we do it intentionally. Most people are not going to do this intentionally, at least not now. So here's an example of how you might decide to report with like this kind of way. So let's say you document your work, you do your technical report. Instead of doing your technical report as your 30-page annual report, because you feel like it's more like 60 pages of information, go ahead and just create a Google Doc and do your 60 pages there. Cover all your sections. Know that it exists. So if anybody asks, you can send them the link to the Google Docs behind everything. Your annual report, which the client says it needs to be visual in 30 pages, you create visual in 30 pages because you know all the information already exists in that Google Doc. So if you miss something, it's okay. It exists. You haven't had to cut it. So now you can be intentional about your 30 pages, your visual 30 pages, maybe turn it into a slide doc. So it's presentation style landscape instead of profile, and put it out that way. So it's easier to share. It's easier to flip through if people go and look at it on their computer. Then let's say we adapt that report into a collection of micrographics. And that could really be like, there are all sorts of times where we go into presentation mode and we create a couple really good charts. And those couple really good charts end up getting a lot of reuse over and over again because they were really good. They described something, they hinted at something, they created engagement around a specific topic. So what you want to do is amplify that, go, okay, those things, we want to intentionally pull them out, a set of images. Every recommendation, if you think of it like a featured image, what if you add a featured image for every recommendation, and that's your micrographic? That way, you know you already have a collection of images after you come out with reports, if you design it that way from the beginning. So you're not doing a lot of extra work. It's just how you're working in the first place. Now you share and engage with your audiences in a way that asks for feedback and really does want that feedback, isn't just asking for it to help you spread the information, but with an interest in understanding how people are going to react to your report or different aspects of your report. So that could be a strategy you follow. Different channels, or different audiences, different channels. People who spend a lot of time on LinkedIn are probably want information a little bit different than people who spend a lot of time on Instagram. Understand the differences, work with the platforms you're going on to. You can't always just create one thing that works for everything. Think strategically the audiences that you're trying to reach and how you can connect with them. Where are you going to find them? and then follow the rules of those channels along with your report and just kind of triangulate how you can start figuring out what kind of content to create for your different audience members. Lastly, how you report, not just how you share, but how you report, how you actually write your reports is another aspect that I think you should think about. And multitasking isn't most times when you try to multitask, you're not doing a whole bunch of things well. You know, you really want to focus on individual tasks when you're doing lots of things. And reporting is one of those, in that really when we design a report, the design, the writing, and the illustration, I create a separate task. So the design for me is how something is constructed, how many words on a page, what I want something to look like, how much content is going to be delivered, how it's going to be delivered, how visual something is. Usually we can start creating the frameworks for this before we ever write down a single word. We have an understanding of what we want to deliver. We can design that. So we can design before we write. Writing is usually the big, I think, modern writing for digital audiences, as Jamie mentioned before about people skim. Usually I suggest people write with header to header to header. Like, one of the fun things to do is try to get it so that if somebody just reads through your headers, they're going to get a story of your evaluation. So if they skipped all the other text, is it telling them something? Or if they just stopped at pictures, people are going to stop at pictures, they're going to stop at headlines, depending on the header length. If they go through it that way, will they get something? So usually how I write for the web is I start with the headers. Even with all my cartoons, I write before I draw. I write the headers, then I write the paragraphs that go behind the headers, and then after that, I illustrate. And illustration can be cartoons, it can be visuals, data visualization, that kind of thing, charts, maps, all these things. And they're there to support the words. They're not there to repeat the words. We're not trying to get it so people don't have to read. What we're trying to do is get it so people will want to read because they'll want the additional context. And it's like a forth. It takes time, takes practice to illustrate well, like good charts, having illustrations in general. And that's the design aspect of it too. Sometimes you're going to have certain visuals, regardless of whether a certain section calls for it or not, just because the overall report is designed that way. And that's how it flows visually. And that's how you can pace somebody to flip through your report. Let's see. All right. My general argument in all of this is that modern reporting is not harder, it's different, and it takes a different strategy. And if you're frustrated with all the different reports that you have to create, it's probably because you haven't changed the way you're creating your reports in the first place. Meaning you're still just trying to create a traditional report, spend a whole bunch of time redesigning that traditional report really clean, and then to try to create all the other infographics and visuals. If you're doing it that way, you're probably spending twice as much time. The goal is to try to look at it more holistically about what you're trying to accomplish. I would say if you're on a budget, it's better not to focus on creating a really well-designed technical report. Just be really content heavy. It can be boring, fine for your technical report. But for your communication vehicles, the things that are meant to engage, you want those to be short, visual. And if you pair them, is the way to go. I would say instead of focusing on trying to better design your technical report, it would be better to create a collection of 10 micrographics that you can share across the web, or that you can share in emails or in presentation decks, that kind of thing. And focus on kind of meeting both. If you have enough money, if you have the budget to create a very well-designed, clean, long report, you can do it, but that's going to take you a lot more time than creating a handful of micrographics and infographics. That can be done really quickly if you have practice and you know what to do with that. I'm going to share a template after it's done. Created this a little bit ago. Might have more things in the future, but I have this, so I'll share that afterwards. I'll share the slides. That's fine with me too. Again, this is my action club. Weekly, I have some sessions and some other courses and thing on different things like Canva design, micrographic design, these types of things. And we talk about examples all the time, like from real world examples. There's some good agencies doing some interesting work along these lines of creating these kind of multi-stage reports that have like a flagship report, a bunch of visuals that go alongside it, downloadables, quotes, these kind of things, and how it's structured. And there's a lot of things that we can pull from the web. Look at organizations that have probably a lot more funding, that are innovative and have a lot of funding. You can find some interesting reporting examples from those usually. And if anyone wants help with their reporting, I do that for a living. You can go to reportpress.org or go to my site, freshspectrum.com/consulting, to get in touch with me. I'm building out a platform. I'm working with a few different clients. I have some proofs of concept, nothing I can share publicly yet. So I'm going to have more examples and stuff out in the near term, in the near future. But it's been really promising and fun to create this way. So, and there it is, reportpress.org. Right now, I have .NET. I'm building and restructuring a little bit and changing the tech a little bit, but you can find examples there. One thing about like dashboards, that kind of thing, you like narrative style reports, they don't have to be like a Tableau dashboard all on one screen. You can build them so that they're more like a New York Times article. And that's probably the better way to build it. If you're a report where you can explain things, you can take the time to annotate and to deliver things kind of systematic, sequentially in narrative format that leads to better engagement. Anybody who wants to connect with me, I also do a free 30-minute, don't mind the whole 45-minute. That's missed a bad screenshot right there. But there's my Calendly account, and you can find it elsewhere too. With that, let's just jump into questions. Does anybody have any? Do we have any in the Q&A?
We do have a couple, yes. The first is a more broad question that maybe people in the audience could pop into the chat and help out with as well. But just wondering if there are any super reliable translators for language, for particularly Thai and Burmese. So if anybody has any recommendations or has come across anything.
For translation, yes. People?
Yeah, this came up when you were talking about translating PDF documents or how you weren't able to translate. So auto translation.
Auto translation is Google Translate. If you just open Chrome, it will auto translate. It has it built in. I think Safari might have something built in too. It's a little meh. Yeah. Actually, there are different languages better than others. Like we were traveling to South Korea. It's not very good for Hangul. But so it's not perfect. There are out there if you're delivering reports via the web, that kind of thing, where if you have certain you're targeting, you can add like a regular human translation onto auto translation, kind of use them both. It's not perfect. The translation tools are getting better though, I would say. Just okay.
Okay. And
hope that helps.
How do you incorporate disability justice into your report strategy? So things like color contrast, image descriptions. She said, for example, she's heard of one good feature of PDFs is they tend to be more screen reader accessible.
I would say for the most part, I think Adobe's done a lot to create accessibility tools. But for the most part, I would argue that PDFs are not better for disability justice in terms of strategy. But a clean kind of starting with a plain text point, regular header structures on a HTML style site, you can a more accessible report that way. It's usually the simpler you kind of report, the better it usually is. High color contrast, image description, text, all that kind of stuff. Most, even just the idea of mobile responsiveness, the idea that things are going to shift around. You can have, you can make your text bigger. All these things are a lot easier to do on the web if you approach the web that way. It's part of that is who your designer and how they're doing reports. And right now, there's also a lot of tools on the web that promise to make everything accessible, but they're less about making it accessible and more making it so that people won't get sued. So keep an eye out for that too. Sometimes user experience testing, the budget, that's your best way to figure out if something's accessible is to get it in the hands of people to test of all walks of life.
Okay. And when we think about pillar, amplifier, and conversational reporting, do you have a recommendation for the sequence of creating and or releasing these?
I would say usually you want to, when you think about it kind of organically, how things would be released with the organization that you're releasing it with. So there are different opportunities to share depending on the different networks people are in, how reports are going to go out. Most of the time, people create an online report, an HTML report that is on a website. Then they'll create the visuals to go alongside and they'll release them at the same time and they'll kind of lead back. So usually, let's say you're creating a slide doc, which makes it really easy to create visuals that you can export as standalone images. If you create them, if you build them into your actual technical report, you can do kind of both things at once. And I would say, shoot for, if you're just getting into this, I would try building your long report and just making sure you have a handful of visuals that you can pull out and create in Canva alongside that illustrate your long report, but that can also be used on their own outside of the report context to deliver more information. Take my cartoons, for example. The vast majority of my cartoons are illustrations of things I've written in blog posts, but my cartoons are seen more than blog posts. So my cartoons travel outside of my blog posts, even though that was where they were originally. So I have my link in the back so people can kind of go back and forth. The blog posts help me create the cartoons. The cartoons then take a life of their own. We can do the same thing with our reports. We write our reports. We visualize the sections of our reports. Those visuals can leave and become their own things, their own entities out in the world. And then the response to that, feeding into and amplifying the response by responding back when people comment, or quoting people as they review and what they pull from a report. Like, let's say you share your report with your key stakeholders in advance and you get their comment from the report. You take those comments, you put them into a visual or into a tool like Canva and then share it out, and that's your amplifier content. So the amplifier stuff probably comes later, but the pillar and not the amplifier, the conversational stuff comes later. The pillar and the amplifier kind of go together in that way.
Okay, thank you. And when you design a report, how do you take the intended audience into account? Daniela reports to corporate clients and is just wondering the best way to report to them.
I was looking for a little note card because I have them around. Whenever I design, I like to take some note cards and just draw a little person on a note card and like what they would ask for if they were to ask for a report. What are they interested in seeing? And think about like 5 to 10 different people. They might even be in the same group because every single person are their own audience, right? Because everybody has different tastes and desires and that kind of stuff. But you try to get like a representative kind of collection of people on little note cards, and And then as you're looking at your report, look at that note card and think about the report and how that person would connect with that report. The cool thing about doing it this way is, let's say you create 6 different representational personas, like little cards of people. And you do that as a group with the other people who are on your team, with other stakeholders. So you all kind of agree at who are these representational people. Then as you report, or as you talk about, get feedback on a reports design, you can say, well, how would Bob, the manager, respond to this? Or Sharon, the project person. And then you can talk about that as a group, because a lot of times we tend to get into our, well, I think this looks better, she thinks this looks better. It's better if you can externalize that and go, but what would Sharon think? And then talk about it external from the group, and it creates better conversations around reporting in terms of how you design for people too.
Thank you.
Yeah, also designkit.org is a nice little resource for different kind of human-centered design techniques, and there's different methods there too that you can check out.
Thank you. Do you have any additional tips for going beyond the PDF when you're working with sensitive evaluation data that can't be shared widely across the web?
I think how we deliver information, technically, if you have the right tools and the right people, you can design a website internally or externally. You can create things for internal audiences and external audiences using the same tools. The challenge is not the technical kind of setup, it's the kind of bureaucratic setup in most organizations for who has rights to the site, who shares where, how are privacy concerns dealt with, who has access rights to different pieces. These tend to be the bigger challenges. Websites are really easy to build. You can build internally on a SharePoint network certain kind of pieces to be more interactive and engaging, but controlling user rights around that aspect. The default is just to create PDFs and email things, but it's not like that super secure. So it's challenging, but it's probably more bureaucratically challenging than anything. I don't know if that's helpful though. But
And we have
private pages on WordPress site.
And we have time for one last question, Chris, and you've covered some of these, but maybe just a recap. Could you suggest some tools that you use for micrographics?
I use a lot of Canva. I use a lot of Wrapper and Flourish into Canva to create visuals. It's kind of how my illustration step goes. So let's see, flourish.org.studio. Flourish and Data Wrapper, if anyone's used them, they're essentially they're tools designed for visualizing news and news articles, that kind of thing. They were developed for newsrooms, not exactly for researchers and that kind of thing, but they're so useful because how journalists report should probably be something we're more likely to, we're better off mimicking than how a business intelligence person would report. It's just a different way to report. You reach broader audiences that way. But those are some of the tools. Is there a hand up in the room, Samantha?
Yes, thank you. I didn't even see that, Chris. You're multitasking over there. Yes, go ahead in the Eval Cafe room.
Hi, this is Lissa in the Eval Cafe room. Thank you for your presentation, Chris. Really early on, I can't remember if folks were let in yet or not, but we kind of talked about some of the issues with analytics, with technology advancing so quickly. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you would go about measuring analytics for whether downloads or visits or getting into that social media piece when you're taking a report that used to be a single PDF document and you're breaking it up into these various smaller pieces.
Usually you're getting a lot more data points, is essentially what's happening. So when you spread, when you share across different networks, you're going to have different tools that you can use to assess different networks. I use a tool called Ubersuggest to look at search engine optimization, look at keywords. If someone is actually designing for things to show up in Google, you can do something like that. There's also SEMrush. There are a couple Ahrefs tools on that, and that just looks at search engines and what shows up in search engines. So it's less about cookies and that kind of thing. The one thing to be careful with is things like Google Analytics, and they're all built to be kind of lead into how Google makes their money. But they're all tons of different analytics options, even cookieless kind of analytics options to kind of undergo that. Let's see, analytics, you're looking at page views, you're looking at conversions, how many people view a page and click on something. You're looking at which pages bring people to your report, all these kind of things. There are so many aspects that you can get into when you go broader, but it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish in the first place, how many people you're trying to reach. But you usually get richer stats when you go into this, and just thinking about the audience and what you're actually trying to accomplish can help you decide what might be a better way to go. I don't know if that's helpful. Just kind of talked around in circles.
Analytics will do that to you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Chris. That was a great presentation. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today and all of your participation. Don't forget to register for our next Eval Cafe on Wednesday, September 20th. That's going to feature Rebecca Teasdale, an assistant professor at the University of Chicago. Her presentation is titled Supporting Criteria Specification and Practice, a model for surfacing values and shaping lines of inquiry. You can find a link to register for any of our upcoming fall evaluation cafes in the chat box right now. And keep an eye out for our evaluation cafe registration email so it's even easier for you to stay in the loop on what we have going on. Thank you.